Hello, everyone. It's Gökçen from VentureWeb. We are here with Ozaal Zesha to talk about building and scaling in the US. Welcome to our channel, Ozaal.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So could you briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
My name is Ozaal Zesha. I'm originally from Pakistan. I'm a tech entrepreneur and I have done two startups before. My first startup was in the consumer electronics space. This was back in 2016. And my second startup is in the Edtech space. It's called ClassNotes. We started it in 2017 and we were very lucky to grow it to more than 35 million users and establish it in around 3 countries around the world. This startup started back in Pakistan as a charity project. So this doesn't really have the roots of building the product with the intention of scaling it or making money out of it. So this was something that we did from the heart, but because it grew so fast, we eventually turned it into a startup and now we are scaling it across the United States. I personally came to the US about a year ago. I'm right now in New York City. And this is now where we are building our team and launching the next platform from.
Great success story. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. So I'll begin with my first question then. US is one of the world's most competitive startup ecosystems, as you already know. So what makes it different from the other markets, you think?
The US is extremely competitive especially if you're in the tech space. And now with the intelligence tools that we have, I would say it's easier than ever to build something. However, there is another thing that people forget about the US, that it's the world's biggest market. Almost everything that is produced on Earth, one third of it is used or consumed by the United States. We have the same numbers for the production and for average usage of consumer. The pie is basically bigger. You face a lot of competition. If you are in a space where you have companies which are very established, it's extremely difficult to operate over here. However, because the market is so big and the appetite to spend money from consumer is really high, you can come up with new or innovative ideas which don't have any competition at all. And then you can operate in that space, have some breathing space for a few years and launch your product, get some audience. No other market has that. I would say only US provides you that kind of playing field where you can just enter in and the consumer is ready to buy your product. That is an extremely important point that goes in the favor of the US. Another point that I've learned from my personal experience is a lot of countries or a lot of startup ecosystems around the world don't really have the appetite for consuming products which are completely new. US has that. So if you build something which is solving a problem that wasn't solved before, or if you build something that is new industry in its own, the consumer which lives in US, they will eventually give you money and they will try your product out. That also goes in your favor. So these two, I would say, are the biggest points that make the US market very different.
Yeah, it has a lot of advantages. So based on all of your experience that you mentioned, for founders looking to expand into the US market, what should they do before entering the market?
This is a very good question because I wish someone would have. I knew this before I came here. My first time in the US was back in 2017. I was invited here by the US State Department on an entrepreneurship exchange program. And as soon as I came in, I was invited by different institutions, including one university in Texas, to speak on product development. After the lecture that I gave there, one of the professors there asked me to move to the US. He would sponsor my education. He would give me a scholarship. He would basically take care of the admission. In 2017, I had a chance to move to the US and I didn't take it. My hypothesis at that time was that I can spend that time because my startup was also growing very fast. So my hypothesis was, let me first make sure that the market that we are in, we understand that market, which at that time was a Pakistani market. And then once we have a good base, we can then move to the US. Now, in hindsight, I think that was a very wrong decision. I should have come to the US earlier. I was, I think, 22, 23 at that time. That would have really given me advantage because entrepreneurship is tough no matter where you are. I've lived in Istanbul for 3 months while expanding ClassNotes. So I also know the Turkish market is also pretty tough. And with the inflation that's been going on, I'm pretty sure the founders who are operating in Turkey, like they're basically operating at a very high pressure level. So if you have a chance, I would say take it and move to the US market earlier. That also goes if you're still in your country and you don't have a chance, make sure your product that you're building is somehow connected to the problem that the consumer in the US faces. That would just give you a larger market to play in. And it's never a wrong decision to go to a larger market. That would be my number one advice, because this is something that I would say, my personal mistake. So I have the scar tissue to prove it. Yeah, but move to the US earlier if you have a chance. And if you are in the middle of building something but can't move at right now, make sure that your product somehow targets a portion of the US market or portion of a problem that exists for the US consumer, so that you can get money from them.
You talked about your journey a bit, so I wanted to talk about a bit more ClassNotes. So you built ClassNotes to 35 million users, as you said. What was the biggest growth lesson from scaling a product in the US market?
Yeah. So most of our market, most of our user base is actually right now not in the US. US is around 20% of our market. ClassNotes started in subcontinent in Pakistan, so a bulk of our market is there. And then because the curriculum that we have on our website, it's also shared by a lot of countries in the MENA region. So we have students from UAE, Saudi Arabia also use it. It's kind of a global platform at this time, but now that we've moved here, all our focus is to make sure that we expand now more in the US sector. Coming back to the question, what's our biggest lesson in terms of growing it? As I said in my introduction, ClassNotes never started as a startup. It started as a charity project because we found a problem that nobody was solving, and that problem was education. And I personally didn't want to make money from education. I think that's something that you do for the betterment of society. So the insight in all of this is try to find a problem which is being ignored by the businesses around you or the people around you, because that problem is basically in a vacuum. And if you find that problem, you'll have at least 2 to 3 years where you can operate in that space without any competition. It will give you a chance to make mistakes. And we certainly did make a lot of mistakes. I would say, tech founder does in their initial years. So the growth lesson is find a problem which is not being addressed, and as soon as you find that, just start building and just start solving that problem. You'll have to do multiple iterations to solve it, but once you do, people will start using your solution. You don't even have to market it. People will come to you. And the good thing about developing markets like Turkey or Pakistan or India is you have a lot of problems that are still not solved. So you can just pick one. And if you come to the US, things are moving so fast right now over here. The pace at which things are moving is creating problem in its own. So just pick one, whatever is closest to you or whatever is dearest to you, and then start solving it. That is my biggest lesson. And that also connects with the first startup that I did. We were creating a product which was not solving a problem. It was just something it was a luxury product, basically. So kind of like, selling vitamin pills. You don't really need them. You won't die if you don't take them. It's just something that you take it for your betterment. And it's extremely hard to build a startup for something like that, where people are not obligated or bound to take it. Now compare that with someone who has, I don't know, a disease that can only be cured by one pill. That pill will definitely sell a lot. So I would say just find that problem, and yeah, the rest will basically sort on its own.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Great lessons. So based on everything you've learned, what are the biggest mistakes international founders make when trying to enter the US ecosystem?
I would say realities that are a bit different over here. For example, one is in the US, it's called a Silicon Valley model, where you share your product without actually making money from it, just so that you can have a larger distribution of your product and get more feedback, keep iterating on it. And you use VC or venture capital money to fund that. It's a very different approach than what I'm personally used to, which is if you're doing a business, it should definitely make money. In the long run, the product which has more distribution, which is spread across to a higher number of people and which people are comfortable in using, that eventually wins over a product which, because you started with a price tag initially, it never got that traction. You could never scale it. That product eventually doesn't really come to people's radar, and people don't end up using it. That is my personal biggest lesson: is if you're operating in the US market, make sure your distribution is set according to the US market. And if you really want to build something which is used by a lot of people, make sure you know the realities of how the VC world works, and how you can leverage them to basically scale your product faster. And once you have that scale, you can then start charging it. It's a fundamentally different way of doing business, but it's an approach that has been proven in the US that it works. You can take a look at any businesses, even the fastest growing businesses right now. Uh, OpenAI, Anthropic, they're all losing money. But the scale at which they're doing it, it's almost unheard of. And I don't think you can do it in any other country.
Mm.
I personally, I think my bill for this year for just for spending on AI tools is around $70,000. So that's why this is my personal expenditure that I'm spending on AI. And I see a lot of people who have the same. So even though these companies are giving these tools at a very low subsidized price, the extent at which they're being used by people who are building stuff or by companies, it's amazing. And they can actually start charging money, and people will be willing to pay it. Yeah, but the model at which they're doing it, it's a very US based model. It's something that you don't see across the world. The US is also the only market where you can go to a city like San Francisco or New York, spend a week over there, and if you have a good product, if you have a good team, or something on your hand which will get attention, you'll definitely have the support of people, be supported by VCs. I haven't seen any other country do that. You can spend years in Pakistan and you won't be able to raise VC capital, even if you have a good product. That is just something, I don't know. The reality of raising funds in Pakistan is different. You need to have connections. You need to be part of a strata of society which gets money. It's very different over here. So be bold. If you do want to come to the US, and if you do want to try your luck in the startup ecosystem over here, I would say don't be afraid of failure. People really do celebrate failure over here. If you've done startup, that's enough for them. They do treat, even if your startup failed, they do treat it as something that because it's very hard to do startups, so they do celebrate it, and you won't be at a disadvantage even if you fail. But the onus is to be brave, to make sure that you're not too afraid to start. If you have that kind of personality where you're just bold and you can take action, I think you'll find a lot of supporters and you'll eventually make it.
Yeah, great insights, really. I think they're really valuable for the international founders, because sometimes the US market is a bit scary, I think, for the founders. So I'm going to ask my last question. What advice would you give to founders who want to build a global company from day one?
Again, my advice would be to make sure, if you want to build a global company, then you have to find a global problem. And you certainly have a lot of them. If you look at the state of the world right now, I would say it's an amazing time to be an entrepreneur, because we have such a huge amount of problem, including the AI slop that is being created. You can go to any platform and you'll just see AI videos. It's very hard to differentiate between what's reality and what's not. I don't think humanity has ever had that problem before. Similarly, with the number of people who are losing their jobs and the amount of new jobs that are being created because of AI, that is another thing that I don't think we have ever faced before. So there's a lot of training that needs to go, a lot of effort that needs to go into to make sure that we solve these problems. And every single one of those efforts is basically a startup that you can start. And that will be a global startup, because people in the US are facing these problems, and you can name any country, they're facing the exact same problems as well. So make sure that you have a global problem that you want to solve. That would be my number one advice. If you do want to start, right now is the best time to start a startup. So one of my biggest complaints for the last few years was, if you name any company right now, they were basically started or went through the dot-com bubble, which is when the internet initially started and it was spread across to the common man. People knew that every single thing would eventually move to the internet. So if you were alive at that time, if you were able to create something at that time, you could have created anything. And it would become successful, or at least it did become successful for some time. So you had a lot of appetite for failure and a lot of people just trying stuff. So my complaint was, people who created Yahoo, Gmail, or all these companies, they had a huge advantage over everyone who came after them because they could just try anything and it would work, or at least they could make mistakes. And then there was this whole, I would say even 2 decades of just SaaS companies, and you had to be perfect in order for you to sell your product. The room to make mistakes was very low because of how things were, and the market overall was not that ready for making mistakes. Now, after a long time, we're back in a situation where we know that everything that is around us, it will eventually be replaced by something which has AI in it. So it's similar to what happened during the dot-com bubble. Like it's the time to build right now. So you have that time again where you can just think of anything that you have seen around you and try to imagine what that would look like in a few years when you have robots around you and when you have AI systems that are very mature, and you can start creating it. And also the cost of creating itself has dropped immensely. Make sure that you take advantage of this specific time period, which won't last long. Honestly, you only have, I would say, 2 to 3 years, because the pace at which people are building companies is it's amazing. So do that. Make sure that you're building during these years instead of finding excuses. That would be number one. And number two would be, if you take a look at how a US company treats finances overall, it makes sense for you to build something that solves a problem specifically for enterprises in the US or for the US consumer. I can give an example over here. $1 million is a good amount of money in Pakistan. But if you build something which which takes around 6 to 7 months to build, and the product itself is good enough, it functions, it works, you can sell that product in the US for several $1 million. And the math behind it works out because you can get a good engineer in the US below 180K, 150K. And you can build a good product without a team of 2 to 3 engineers. So if you multiply that by 6 months, that's 450 multiplied by six. The number itself that the company needs to build something, even if it's small, the cost of it goes into millions of dollars. So if you are in a country where you can find a team and you can build something at a much lower price, but it's for the US market, you can do that sitting over in any country, and then you can sell it to the US enterprise. And I've seen that's most of the people that I've connected over here in New York City over the last few months. They just build simple things, but they were able to sell it for hundreds of millions of dollars to these US companies. And then once they had that money, they could then dream big and work on bigger products. So yeah, find a product or find a problem that is faced by these companies that are operating in the US market, because they're already spending billions of dollars. So if you build something that they are facing, they will easily give you a few $1 million, or they'll acquire you. There are a lot of possibilities, but make sure that the problem, like you know the inside, you know the problem that these companies or these people are facing.
Yeah, great insights. I think founders cannot find any advice on the internet like you mentioned. They were really specific. Thanks again for joining us today. It was all of my questions, and it was a really energetic conversation for me. And I hope it was for the founders as well. So yeah, we will follow your journey ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, you too. Bye bye.
All right.